They told me I could sleep in the small room. Not asked, not suggested, told. It happened in my own hallway, right between the coat rack I bought in 1987 and the narrow console table where I still keep a porcelain bowl from Limoges that my late husband once carried home, wrapped in newspaper like it was treasure. I was standing there in my wool house cardigan, holding a dish towel that still smelled faintly of rosemary and browned butter, when Celine looked at me and said it like she was assigning seating at dinner. It just makes more sense, Mavis. The kids need space. Hello, everyone. I'm Grace. And I'll tell you this straight. When someone calmly starts rearranging your life inside your own home, that's not practicality. That's displacement. What would you feel in that moment? I didn't answer her right away. Not because I didn't have words. I had plenty. Sharp ones, old ones, tired ones. But I've lived 69 years, and I've learned that silence, when used properly, weighs more than shouting. So I just looked past her, into my own kitchen. My kitchen. Or what used to be mine. The smell of something sweet and overspiced hung in the air. Cinnamon, too much of it, drowning everything else. Celine had been experimenting again, turning my simple recipes into something unrecognizable, like she couldn't stand the idea that anything in this house existed before her. My copper pan sat on the stove, streaked and improperly cleaned. The good knives were in the dishwasher. The wrong drawer. Small things, people would say. Small irritations. But small things are how people erase you. They've got school, activities. You know how it is, she added, softer this time, like she was explaining something to a stubborn neighbor. I finally looked at her properly. Celine Belcroft. 42, always composed, always polished. Even now, standing in my hallway, wearing a tailored blouse that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, she didn't look like someone asking for anything. She looked like someone informing. Behind her, I could see Graham hovering near the kitchen entrance. My son. My only son. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the floor tiles like they held instructions on how to survive this moment. Graham, I said. Just his name. Nothing else. He shifted, cleared his throat, and gave me that half smile I'd seen since he was 12 and trying to talk his way out of trouble. It's temporary, Mom. Just until things settle. Temporary. That word again. It had been temporary when they moved in. Temporary when they took over the guest room. Temporary when the bills started coming addressed to him instead of me. Temporary when my name slowly disappeared from conversations happening in my own living room. Temporary has a way of becoming permanent when you don't interrupt it. I folded the dish towel slowly, carefully, like precision might hold me together. And where exactly is this small room? I asked. Celine turned slightly and pointed down the hallway. The back room. The one that used to be storage before I turned it into a sewing space. Narrow window, cold in winter, too warm in summer. A room you adapt to, not one you choose. That one, she said. It's quiet. You'll like it. You'll like it. I almost smiled. I walked past her without another word, my slippers barely making a sound against the wood floor, and stood at the doorway of that room. The light inside was dim, filtered through thin curtains I hadn't touched in years. My old sewing machine sat covered in a floral cloth. A faint smell of lavender sachets lingered in the air. They had already cleared space. A small bed. Not mine. A narrow one, pushed against the wall like an afterthought. My things had been moved. Folded. Compressed, prepared. That's when it landed. This wasn't a suggestion. This was a decision that had already been made, just waiting for me to agree to it quietly. I ran my fingers along the edge of the dresser, feeling the faint dust where something had been removed. My reflection stared back at me in the mirror, gray hair neatly pinned, shoulders still straight, eyes that had seen too much to pretend not to understand what was happening. 69 years old, and being reassigned inside my own home. Behind me, I heard Celine's voice again, lighter now, almost relieved. We thought this would be best for everyone. For everyone. I closed my eyes for just a second, and that was the exact moment I knew. They weren't asking me to move rooms, they were testing if I would disappear. I turned back toward the hallway, toward both of them, and for the first time that day, I felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. And once you have that, you don't argue. You act. I looked straight at my son, and in my mind, the date was already set. Friday. They didn't arrive all at once like a storm. No slammed doors, no desperate phone calls in the middle of the night. It was quieter than that, more civilized, which, in my experience, usually means more dangerous. It started with a conversation over tea. Graham sat across from me at the kitchen table, back when it was still my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup he barely touched. He looked tired, worn down in a way that didn't come from work alone. I remember the way the afternoon light hit his face, catching the gray that had started creeping into his beard. For a moment, I didn't see a 45-year-old man. I saw my boy, the one who used to fall asleep on that very table while I balanced accounts and hummed to keep myself awake. "Mom," he said, careful, measured. "We're in a bit of a situation." That was how he phrased it. A situation? I didn't ask for details right away. I let him speak. People reveal more when they think they're guiding the conversation. Celine filled in the gaps, of course. She always did. Calm voice, perfectly structured sentences, not a word wasted. Something about investments that didn't turn out as expected. A partnership that fell through. Temporary liquidity issues. She used phrases like that, polished, professional, like she was presenting a quarterly report instead of explaining why they needed help. "They just need a little time to stabilize," she said, resting her hand lightly on Graham's arm. "A few months at most." A few months. I remember nodding, slowly, thoughtfully, like I always do when I'm making a decision I already understand better than the people asking for it. "You'll stay here," I said. "Of course." Graham exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. Celine smiled, not wide, not relieved, just satisfied. That should have told me everything I needed to know. But love has a way of softening the edges of suspicion. The first week was almost pleasant. They were polite, careful. Celine asked before moving things. Graham insisted on fixing a cabinet hinge that had been loose for years. The children were respectful, quiet, curious about everything in the house like it was some kind of museum. I told myself I had done the right thing. Then the adjustments began. Small ones. My morning routine shifted first. I used to wake early, make my tea. Proper tea, loose-leaf Darjeeling, not those tasteless little bags, and sit by the window while the street came to life. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found Celine already there, reorganizing the cupboards. "I thought this would be more efficient," she said, holding up my spice rack like it was a problem she had solved. My spices, which had stayed in the same order for 20 years, were suddenly alphabetical. I smiled, thanked her. Because what kind of woman complains about someone trying to help? The next change was the refrigerator. Labels appeared, little white tags. Kids, lunch prep, dinner plan, my homemade things, my quince preserves, my slow-cooked broths were pushed to the back, then gradually forgotten. Then came the living room, my husband's chair, a deep, worn bergère that still carried the faint scent of tobacco and cedar, was moved. Not removed, just shifted. Slightly off-center, as if it didn't quite belong in the new arrangement. Better flow, Celine said. Better flow. I said nothing, because each change, on its own, was small enough to forgive. That's how it works. You don't notice when someone starts rewriting your life if they do it one sentence at a time. By the second month, the house sounded different. Louder, busier, full of schedules that weren't mine. I heard my own name less often, and when I did, it was usually followed by something practical. Does Mavis still use this drawer? Has she paid that bill yet? Can she watch the kids on Thursday? Can she? Not Mom, not you. Can she? I remember the first time I realized they were talking about me while I was in the room. I was sitting right there at the table, stitching the hem of an old linen napkin, when Celine turned to Graham and said, "If we move her things into the back room eventually, we could open this space up." Eventually. That word settled somewhere deep in my chest. I didn't react. Not then. I finished the stitch, tied the thread, smoothed the fabric. Because reacting too early only teaches people how far they can push you next time. Instead, I started paying attention to the bills that stopped coming in my name, to the way Graham avoided certain questions, to the quiet confidence in Celine's voice whenever she spoke about plans. Plans I had never been part of. And the strangest part? They didn't think they were doing anything wrong. That's what stayed with me. Not cruelty, not even disrespect at first. Just certainty. The kind of certainty people have when they believe something already belongs to them. I sat there one evening, listening to them discuss repainting the master bedroom, my bedroom, in soft, neutral tones that would appeal to a broader taste. That was the phrase she used. Broader taste. As if the house was already on the market. As if I was already gone. And that's when I understood something very simple. They hadn't come here to stay. They had come here to take over. And they were waiting to see how long it would take me to notice. Once you start paying attention, truly paying attention, the house begins to speak to you in ways it didn't before. Not with noise, not with arguments, with patterns. I noticed it first in the mail. For 40 years, the mailbox at the end of my driveway had carried my name. Mavis Belcroft. Even after my husband passed, even after everything changed, that little black box still knew who this house belonged to. Bills, letters, the occasional handwritten note from someone who still remembered how to write them. All of it came to me. Then one afternoon I opened it and saw something different. Graham Belcroft. Not unusual, you might think. A son receiving mail. Perfectly normal. Except it wasn't just one envelope. It was 5. Bank statements. Insurance notices. Something from a lender I didn't recognize. All with this address printed neatly beneath his name, like it had always been his. I stood there a moment longer than necessary, fingers resting on the edge of the metal door, feeling something tighten in my chest. They hadn't asked. They had just started. That evening, I placed the stack on the kitchen counter, carefully, not accusingly, and poured myself a cup of tea. Not Darjeeling this time. Something stronger. Assam. The kind that doesn't apologize for its bitterness. Your mail came, I said. Graham glanced at it, then at me. Just a flicker, a calculation. Oh, yeah. It's just temporary, Mom. Easier for paperwork. Temporary. There it was again. Celine didn't even look up from her tablet. It streamlines things, she added. We're consolidating accounts. We. Not we as a family living together. We as in a unit that did not include me. I nodded, took a slow sip of tea, and said nothing. Because by then, I had started collecting information the way I used to balance ledgers. Quietly. Precisely. Without announcing it. The next thing I noticed was the bills. Electricity, water, property tax. Things I had handled for decades without a second thought. They still arrived, but something about them felt off. Timing. Amounts. One afternoon, I sat down with my reading glasses and went through them line by line. There were changes, autopay setups I hadn't authorized, contact emails that weren't mine, a secondary number listed beneath my own, Graham's. I leaned back in my chair, the paper still in my hands, and let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. They weren't just living in my house. They were integrating into it. System by system, layer by layer, like ivy. Slow, quiet, difficult to remove once it takes hold. Later that week, I overheard something that confirmed what I had already begun to suspect. They thought I was asleep. I wasn't. At my age, sleep comes in fragments. Light. Easily broken. That night, I had gotten up for water, just a small glass, the kind I keep on the nightstand. And as I passed the hallway, I heard their voices from the living room. Low. Focused. It's just a matter of time, Celine was saying. Yeah, but we have to be careful, Graham replied. If she gets defensive. She won't, Celine cut in, calm as ever. She avoids conflict. That's her pattern. Pattern. I stood there, just out of sight, one hand resting lightly against the wall. She's already adjusting, Celine continued. You saw today. She didn't say a word about the mail. Graham hesitated. Still, it's her house. There was a pause. A small one. Just enough for truth to slip through. For now, Celine said. For now. 2 words. That's all it took. I went back to my room without making a sound, set the glass of water down untouched, and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. 69 years. I have lived long enough to recognize when someone is waiting for you to become smaller, to take up less space, to speak less, to exist less. And I have lived long enough to know that once people start planning your absence, they've already made room for it. The next morning, I made breakfast as usual. Eggs, lightly scrambled, a slice of toasted sourdough, a small dish of apricot preserve, not the cheap kind, but the one I order twice a year from a little place that still believes food should taste like something. Celine walked in, glanced at the stove, and frowned slightly. Oh, we've been trying to keep things a bit lighter in the mornings, she said. For the kids. Of course, for the kids. I plated my breakfast anyway, sat down, took a bite, and for the first time since they moved in, I didn't adjust. Not my routine, not my tone, not myself. Because something had shifted. They thought I was passive, predictable, safe to move around like furniture. But what they didn't understand, what they had never taken the time to understand, was this. I wasn't quiet because I was weak. I was quiet because I was watching. And by that point, I had seen enough. Enough to know exactly what they were doing. And enough to know exactly what I was going to do next. The first time I heard my future being discussed like a scheduling inconvenience, I was standing 3 feet away from them, holding a tray of tea I had just brewed. They didn't lower their voices. That's the detail that stayed with me. People lower their voices when they know they're doing something wrong. They whisper when there's guilt involved. But when someone speaks openly, casually, with no adjustment at all, that means they believe they have nothing to hide. Or worse, they believe you don't matter enough to hide it from. It was a Sunday, late afternoon. The kind of soft, quiet day I used to love. The house smelled faintly of baked apples and cloves. I had made a simple tart earlier, something I've done for years without needing a recipe. The kind of thing that used to bring Graham running into the kitchen when he was a boy. Now the tart sat mostly untouched on the counter. Celine had guests over, not asked, not mentioned in advance. Just happened. 3 women, all polished in the same way she was. Hair perfectly set, voices controlled, laughter measured like it had been rehearsed. They sat in my living room, legs crossed, cups balanced delicately in their hands, discussing things that sounded important but meant very little. Interior palettes, school programs. A fundraiser that required just a bit of coordination. I stood in the doorway for a moment before entering, tray in hand. "My mother-in-law," Celine said lightly, without turning toward me. Not introducing me, just labeling. They all looked up at once, smiles, polite, brief, the kind you give to someone you don't expect to remember. "Mavis," I said, setting the tray down with steady hands. "Tea?" They thanked me. One of them complimented the cups. Wedgwood, pale blue, older than any of them. I nodded. Then I stepped back. Not far. Just enough to sit in my own chair. My husband's chair. The one that had already been shifted once but not yet removed. And that's when it happened. Celine leaned forward slightly, lowering her cup onto the saucer with that precise little movement she always used when transitioning into something she considered practical. "We're thinking of opening up the main bedroom," she said. "It's really the only way to make the space functional long-term." One of the women tilted her head. "And your mother-in-law?" Celine didn't even glance in my direction. "Oh, she's very adaptable," she replied. "We'll move her into the back room. It's actually quite cozy once you clear it out." Clear it out. Like I was clutter. The other women nodded. One of them smiled in that sympathetic way people use when they think they're being kind. "That's good," she said. "At that stage, simplicity is better anyway." At that stage. I folded my hands in my lap, feeling the fabric of my skirt between my fingers, grounding myself in something real. Celine continued, as if she were outlining a renovation plan. And eventually, we're considering assisted living options. Not immediately, of course, just planning ahead. Planning ahead. They were planning my removal. In my house. While I was sitting right there. One of the women finally looked at me directly. "It's important to think about these things early," she said gently, as if offering wisdom. "Transitions are easier that way." Transitions. I met her eyes, and for a brief second, something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, maybe. A small, almost invisible hesitation, because I wasn't nodding, I wasn't smiling, I was just looking. Not angry, not upset, just present. Fully present. Celine picked up on it. Of course she did. She always read a room quickly. "Mavis has always been very flexible," she added, her tone softening just enough to sound respectful. Flexible. I almost admired the word choice. It sounded like a compliment. But what it really meant was, she bends. The conversation moved on after that. Laughter returned. Plans continued. Someone mentioned a boutique catering service that specialized in something called saffron-infused amuse-bouche, tiny, delicate things that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. I sat there through all of it, quiet, observing. And something inside me shifted again. Not sharply, not dramatically, just firmly. Because up until that moment, there had still been a small part of me, a quiet, stubborn part, that believed this might all be misunderstanding, that maybe they were careless, not calculated, thoughtless, not deliberate. That moment removed that doubt. Completely. They weren't confused. They were confident. Confident that I would allow this. Confident that I would adjust. Confident that I would step aside without making it difficult. After they left, Selene gathered the cups, stacking them neatly on the tray I had brought in. "That went well," she said to Graham, who had just come back into the room, glancing around like he had missed something important. He nodded. "Yeah." Then he looked at me. "Mom, you okay?" Such a simple question, so casually asked. I held his gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then I smiled. A small one. Controlled. "I'm perfectly fine," I said. And for the first time since they moved into my house, I wasn't lying. I didn't confront them after that Sunday. Not because I was afraid, because I was done reacting. There's a difference. When you react, you give people a chance to adjust their behavior just enough to keep you where they want you. They apologize, they soften, they rephrase. And then, once you settle again, they continue exactly as before, just quieter. No. I had no interest in teaching them how to hide it better. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I went back to work. Not the kind that involves offices or schedules, the kind that built this house in the first place. Quiet, methodical, deliberate work. The kind that doesn't announce itself until it's already finished. The next morning, I pulled out a folder I hadn't opened in a long time, thick, cream-colored, slightly worn at the edges. Inside was everything that mattered. The deed, insurance documents, property tax receipts, maintenance records going back 23 years, every repair, every payment, every signature in my handwriting. Mavis Belcroft. Over and over again. I sat at the dining table, still mine, for now, and spread everything out in front of me like I used to do when I balanced the books for the business Graham barely remembers I built. Back then, numbers told stories. They still do. And this one was very clear. This house was mine. Not partially, not conditionally. Not for now. Entirely. Paid for. Maintained. Documented. There was no ambiguity, which made what they were doing interesting. I reached for my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years. Leonard Varelli. His father had handled our legal affairs when my husband was alive. Quiet man. Precise. Never wasted words. Leonard had taken over the practice after him, sharper, less patient, but just as thorough. The phone rang twice. "Mavis Belcroft," he said when he answered, voice already recognizing mine. "That's a name I haven't heard in a while." "Good morning, Leonard." A pause, then a shift in tone, warmer, respectful. "What can I do for you?" I didn't explain everything. I didn't need to. I gave him the outline, the essentials. Who lived in the house? What had changed? What I suspected. Silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then, "Do they have any legal claim?" "No." "Have you signed anything recently?" No. Given them power of attorney? Absolutely not. Another pause. Longer this time. Well, he said finally, then this is much simpler than they think it is. Simpler than they think. I leaned back slightly in my chair, letting that settle. They're behaving like it's already theirs, I said. They often do, Leonard replied. People confuse access with ownership all the time. Access. Such a polite word for what was happening under my roof. I want to make sure everything is… I paused, choosing the right word. Secure. It already is, he said, but we can make it clearer. Clearer. I like that. We spoke for another 20 minutes. Specifics. Steps. Not emotional, not dramatic, just structured. By the time I hung up, I had something I hadn't felt in a while. Control. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself. That afternoon, I drove to the bank. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't need to. The building hadn't changed much. Same polished floors. Same faint scent of paper and polished wood. Different faces behind the desks, but the rhythm was the same. Orderly. Predictable. I sat down with a young man named Oliver, who spoke too quickly and smiled too often, but he knew his job. I'd like to review all linked accounts and payment authorizations connected to my property, I said. He blinked once, then nodded, fingers already moving across the keyboard. Of course, Mrs. Belcroft. It didn't take long. That was the surprising part. Everything they had done, every adjustment, every streamline, every quiet little integration was right there on the screen. Additional contacts, secondary access points, notifications redirected. Nothing illegal, just convenient. For them. Can we remove all secondary access? I asked. Immediately, he said. And notifications? Reverted to primary. Good. I watched as he worked, each click undoing something they had put in place without ever asking me. It felt precise. Like resetting a room after someone had rearranged it without permission. When I stepped outside, the air felt different. Not lighter. Sharper. Clearer. I stood there for a moment, adjusting my gloves. Soft leather, dark brown, something my husband used to insist I buy in pairs because good things deserve to last. Then I got into my car and drove home. Slowly. Not because I needed time to think. Because I already had. When I walked through the front door, I could hear them in the kitchen again. Voices. Movement. The sound of something being chopped too aggressively on my cutting board. Life continuing. As if nothing had changed. I hung my coat, placed my keys in their usual spot, and stepped inside. Celine glanced up briefly. You're back. I am. Graham looked over his shoulder. Everything okay? Such a simple question. Again. I met his eyes. Held them. And this time, there was no softness left to misread. Yes, I said. Everything was finally exactly as it should be. They just didn't know it yet. The shift didn't happen loudly. No raised voices. No dramatic declarations. Just tension. The kind that settles into walls and lingers in the air, like something slightly burnt you can't quite get rid of. They felt it. Even if they didn't understand it yet. It started with small things. The kind people like Celine notice immediately, but pretend not to. Her tablet stopped syncing with the house utilities. She mentioned it casually at first, tapping the screen with controlled irritation. That's odd, she said. The account access isn't loading. I was sitting at the table, slicing an apple. Thin, even pieces, the way my husband used to like. I didn't look up. Is it? I replied. She tried again. Same result. Graham stepped in, of course. He always did when something didn't go according to plan. "I'll check it later," he said. "Probably just a glitch." "Probably." I kept slicing. A few minutes later, she opened the fridge, paused, and frowned. "Did you move things?" "No," I said simply. She stood there a second longer than necessary, then closed the door without another word. Because she knew. Not what exactly, but enough. By evening, the tone in the house had changed. Quieter. More careful. Like they were both trying to figure out what had shifted without admitting that anything had shifted at all. That's when Graham approached me. Not in the kitchen, not in front of Celine, in the hallway. The same hallway. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed loosely, trying to look relaxed. But I could see it in his eyes. That restless calculation again. The same one from years ago when he used to decide whether to tell me the truth or shape it into something easier. "Mom," he said, keeping his voice low, "did you change something with the accounts?" There it was. Not anger, not accusation, just concern. I turned to face him fully. "Yes," I said. No explanation, no softening, just the truth. He blinked once, caught off guard by how quickly I answered. "Oh, okay. I mean, why? Why?" Such an interesting question. I tilted my head slightly, studying him. "Because they're mine," I said. Simple, clear, final. You feel that shift? That moment when calm stops being weakness and starts feeling like control. She's not arguing anymore. She's positioning. "What would you do right here?" Graham let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Of course they are," he said quickly. "I just meant we were using them to manage things more efficiently." "We?" The word landed between us like something heavier than it should have been. He hesitated. "Yeah, I mean, the household." I nodded slowly. "The household," I repeated. Then I stepped a little closer. Not aggressively, just enough that he had to actually look at me. "Graham," I said quietly, "do you know what the difference is between living in a house and owning it?" He frowned slightly, thrown off by the question. "What?" "One requires comfort," I continued. "The other requires responsibility." Silence. He shifted his weight. "I've handled this house for over 30 years, I added, without confusion. "I'm not saying you haven't," he replied quickly. "I just think—" "I know what you think." That stopped him. Completely. Because I said it without raising my voice, without emotion. Just certainty. From the kitchen, I could hear Celine moving. Slower now, more deliberate. Listening, even if she pretended not to. Graham ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, no one's trying to take anything from you," he said. I held his gaze, not blinking, not reacting. "Then we agree," I said. He blinked. "Agree on what?" "That nothing has changed." A longer silence this time, because now he understood. Not everything, but enough. I stepped past him, back toward the kitchen, picking up my plate as if the conversation had never happened. Because in a way, it hadn't. Not the one they thought they were having. That night, I heard them talking again. Quieter than before. More careful. "She's acting different," Graham said. "She noticed something," Celine replied. "We just need to adjust." Adjust. Always adjusting. Always planning the next step. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of voices that thought they were still in control. And for the first time since they moved in, I allowed myself a small, private thought. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear. They were still playing the same game. They just hadn't realized yet. I had already changed the rules. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I couldn't sleep, because I didn't need to. There's a kind of clarity that settles in once a decision is made. Not announced, not argued, just decided. It quiets everything, even the body. I got out of bed, put on my robe, and walked down the hallway before anyone else was awake. The house felt different in the morning. Still mine. For now. I paused in the kitchen doorway and looked around. Really looked this time. The arrangement Celine had imposed still stood. Jars aligned like soldiers, labels facing forward, surfaces cleared of anything that didn't fit her idea of clean. It was neat, but it wasn't alive. I walked in, opened a cabinet, and reached for my tea. Loose leaf. Darjeeling again. I didn't rush. I didn't hide what I was doing. I let the kettle hum slowly. Let the steam rise. Let the scent fill the space the way it used to before everything became efficient. Then I did something small. I moved things back. Not dramatically. Not enough for anyone to accuse me of making a statement. Just enough to remind the room of its original order. My spice jars returned to their place. My wooden spoon, the one with the slight burn mark on the handle, went back into the drawer where my hand expects to find it without thinking. Memory matters in a house. It's what separates a home from a layout. By the time Celine walked in, I was already seated, tea in hand, reading glasses low on my nose, going through a thin folder. She stopped, not visibly, but I felt it. That slight pause in movement when something doesn't match expectation. "Oh," she said lightly, "you're up early." "I always have been." She glanced at the counter, the spice rack, the drawer. Nothing out of place. But not exactly how she left it. She didn't say anything. Not yet. Graham came in a few minutes later, slower, less composed. He poured coffee, took a sip, and immediately frowned. "Did we change the beans?" he asked. "No," I said without looking up. "You did." He blinked, then looked at Celine. She gave a small shrug. "I switched brands last week." He took another sip, less confident this time. "Right." Silence settled. Not heavy, just unfamiliar. I closed the folder in front of me and set it aside. Celine's eyes flicked toward it instantly. "What's that?" she asked. "Paperwork." "What kind?" "Mine." That was enough. For now. Later that afternoon, I made 2 more calls. One to a locksmith. One to a storage company. Both short. Both precise. No explanations needed. The locksmith was scheduled for Thursday. The storage company for Friday morning. I didn't hide it. I wrote the times down on a small notepad and left it on the side table in the hallway. The same one where Celine had first told me about the small room. Let them see it. Let them wonder. That evening, Celine approached me again. Not directly. She leaned against the kitchen counter while I was preparing dinner. Something simple. Something unmistakably mine. Pan-seared chicken with thyme, a proper reduction sauce, not the overcomplicated things she liked to attempt. "You've been busy," she said. "I have." "With what exactly?" I turned the heat down, let the sauce settle, then looked at her. "With my house." There it was again. That word. Mine. She smiled. Polite. Measured. But it didn't reach her eyes this time. "Of course," she said. "We all want what's best for the house." We. Still. I plated the food, set it down, and finally answered her properly. "No," I said. "Not we. Just that. Nothing more." She held my gaze for a second longer than usual, then nodded. Slowly. because now she understood something had shifted beyond adjustment. This wasn't about arrangement anymore. This was about authority. That night, Graham didn't wait for privacy. He spoke at the table, in front of everyone. "Mom," he said, trying to sound calm. "What's going on?" The children went quiet. Celine didn't move. I cut my food carefully, placed the fork down, and looked at him. "What do you mean?" "The calls, the notes, the changes." "Ah, changes." I wiped my hands with my napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it beside my plate. Then I answered, "I'm preparing." "For what?" "Friday." The word sat on my tongue for a fraction of a second before I said it. "For clarity," I replied. He frowned. Celine didn't. She already knew, and that's when I saw it for the first time. Not confidence, not control. Concern. Just a flicker. But enough. Because whatever they had planned, it didn't include this version of me. And now, for the first time since they stepped into my house, they were the ones trying to understand what came next. The house doesn't react all at once when tension rises. It changes in layers. Doors close a little quieter. Conversations stop when you enter. Footsteps become measured, like people are thinking before they move. By the next day, everything felt calculated. Celine didn't ask me anything in the morning, not about the notes, not about the calls, not about Friday. She observed. That's her strength. She stood in the kitchen, coffee in hand, watching how I moved, what I touched, what I ignored, what I returned to its place without hesitation. She was trying to map a pattern again, but this time, there wasn't one she could use, because I wasn't adjusting anymore. I was restoring. Around noon, the first crack appeared. It came from one of the children, Elliot, the older one, 13. Sharp in that quiet way, the kind that notices more than adults give him credit for. He walked into the living room where I was sitting, sorting through a small stack of papers, not hiding them, just working. "Grandma?" he said. "Yes, Elliot." He hesitated. Then, "Mom said this is going to be our house soon." There it was. Not polished, not rehearsed, just truth, dropped carelessly into the room by someone who didn't yet understand the weight of it. I looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't trying to be cruel. He wasn't even trying to test me. He was just repeating what he had been told. "And how do you feel about that?" I asked. He shrugged, uncertain now. "I don't know. Mom said it makes sense, that you don't need all the space anymore." Of course she did. I folded the paper in my hands once neatly, then set it aside. "And what do you think?" I asked again. He shifted his weight. "I think it's your house," he said finally, quieter now. Smart boy. I gave him a small nod. "It is," I said. He lingered for a second longer, like he wanted to ask something else, then turned and left. That moment didn't shake me. It confirmed everything. By late afternoon, Celine made her move. She approached me in the living room, not the kitchen this time. Neutral ground. Smart. "Mavis," she began, tone calm, composed. "I think we need to talk." I looked up from my chair. "I agree." She sat across from me, crossing her legs neatly, hands folded in her lap. Presentation mattered to her, even now. "There seems to be some misunderstanding," she said. Misunderstanding. I almost admired how consistently she used that word. "About Friday," she added. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch just enough to make it uncomfortable. Then, "What about Friday?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Not much." Just enough. The notes, the calls, the schedule, she said. You're making arrangements without discussing them with us. Us. Still. I leaned back slightly in my chair. I don't need to discuss my arrangements. Her smile tightened. Mavis, we're all living here. Decisions affect everyone. No, I said calmly. They affect those who own the decisions. That landed, harder than anything I had said before, because there was no softness in it, no room to reinterpret. She adjusted her posture slightly, recalibrating. Graham is your son, she said, shifting tactics. This is his home too? No, I replied again, just as evenly. It isn't. Silence. Real silence this time, the kind that doesn't move. From the hallway, I could feel rather than hear Graham standing there, listening, not entering, waiting. Celine exhaled slowly. You're overreacting, she said, and for the first time, there was a trace of something sharper underneath. No one is trying to push you out. I held her gaze. Then why did you prepare a room for me? She didn't answer. Why did you tell people I was moving out? I continued. Still nothing. Why is your son telling me this is going to be his house? That one hit. Because she hadn't planned for that. For Elliot. For truth slipping out of a child's mouth without structure. Her composure cracked, just a fraction. But enough. That's not what we meant, she said quicker now. You're twisting things. No, I said. I'm seeing them. Celine stood up, not abruptly, but decisively. I think we should wait for Graham, she said. This isn't a conversation to have like this. It already is, I replied. At that moment, Graham stepped in. Finally. What's going on? He asked, though he had heard enough. Celine turned to him immediately. Your mother is making decisions about the house without us, she said. Without us. He looked at me, then at her, then back at me, and I could see it. The moment he realized this wasn't something he could smooth over. Not this time. Mom? He said. I stood up slowly, not rushed, not tense, just certain. You have until Friday, I said. No explanation, no raised voice, just the sentence. It hung in the room like something irreversible. Graham blinked. Celine didn't move. Until Friday for what? He asked. And that's when I finally said it out loud. Clear, simple, final. To move out. For a second, no one moved. That's what people don't tell you about moments like this. They don't explode. They freeze. The air thickens. Time stretches. And everyone in the room understands all at once that something has just shifted in a way that cannot be undone. To move out. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. Graham stared at me like he hadn't heard me correctly. Celine didn't stare. She calculated. You can't be serious, Graham said finally, his voice low, controlled. The way it gets when he's trying not to lose control in front of someone else. I am. That's not funny, Mom. I'm not trying to be funny. Silence again. Then it broke, not with shouting, with disbelief. This is our home too, he said, sharper now. We live here. The kids, you stay here, I corrected quietly. You don't live here. That hit him harder than anything else, because it stripped the illusion clean. Celine stepped in immediately, her voice smoother, more measured. Mavis, she said, let's not escalate this. You're upset. That's understandable. But making ultimatums? It's not an ultimatum. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't interrupt her with force. Just place the truth down again. It's a deadline. That stopped her. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she shifted tactics. Again. This is Graham's family, she said. Your grandchildren. You're asking them to leave their home with no notice? No, I replied. I'm asking them to leave my house with 3 days' notice. Precision matters. Words matter. Graham let out a breath, this time louder, frustration bleeding through. This is insane, he said, running a hand through his hair. Where are we supposed to go? Do you even hear yourself? I looked at him. Steady. I hear myself perfectly. Then listen to me, he snapped. We moved here because you said we could, because you wanted to help. I did. And now you're just throwing us out? Yes. The simplicity of it landed harder than any argument, because there was nothing to push against, no emotion to twist, no guilt to lean on, just a decision. Celine's composure cracked a little more this time. You're being unreasonable, she said. This isn't how family behaves. Family? Such a convenient word. I turned to her. No, I said. This is exactly how someone behaves when they realize they're being replaced in their own home. That one landed. Deep. Graham looked between us, tension building in his shoulders. No one is replacing you, he said. I didn't even blink. Then why was my room reassigned? He opened his mouth, closed it, because there was no answer, not one that wouldn't confirm everything. From the hallway, I could hear the faint sound of movement. One of the children, probably listening. The house itself felt like it was holding its breath. Celine straightened her posture. You're twisting intentions into accusations, she said. We were trying to make the space work for everyone by removing me from it. That's not what it is. I stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough to end the distance. You didn't ask, I continued. You decided, you rearranged, you informed, and then you waited to see if I would accept it. Her jaw tightened, because she knew every word was accurate. Graham stepped forward now, frustration turning into something heavier. Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion, he said. It's just a room. We can figure it out. No, I said, and this time there was something in my voice, not louder, not harsher, just final. We're not figuring anything out. Silence. Again. But different now, because this time they understood. This wasn't a conversation anymore. This was execution. Celine crossed her arms slightly. So that's it? She said. You're just done? Yes. And you expect us to just leave? Pack up our lives and walk out because you decided you're uncomfortable? I held her gaze. I expect you to leave because this house is mine. No hesitation, no apology, just ownership. Graham shook his head, pacing now. This is unbelievable, he muttered. After everything. Everything? I cut in, quiet, sharp. What exactly have you done, Graham? That stopped him mid-step. He looked at me, really looked, and for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Not irritation, not defensiveness, uncertainty. Because now he was being asked a question he couldn't answer with emotion, only with truth. And there wasn't much of it on his side. You're my son, I said. Not my landlord, not my replacement, not my successor. Each word placed carefully. You were welcome here, I added. You were not entitled. That word, entitled, it lingered, heavy, unavoidable. Celine looked at him. He looked at the floor, and in that brief, quiet moment, they both understood something at the same time. They had pushed too far, and I wasn't stepping back anymore. I walked past them toward the hallway, toward the room they had prepared for me. I paused at the doorway, then turned slightly. Friday, I repeated. No explanation. No warning. Just the date. And then I walked in and closed the door behind me. They didn't sleep that night. I could tell. You learn the rhythm of a house when you've lived in it long enough. You know when it settles, when it breathes, when it rests. That night, it didn't. There were footsteps past midnight, quiet arguments behind closed doors, the soft click of a phone screen lighting up again and again, drawers opening, closing, opening again. Planning. Always planning. By morning, the house felt divided. Not physically, but clearly. Two sides. And a line no one could pretend wasn't there anymore. I was already in the kitchen when Graham walked in. Earlier than usual. Shirt wrinkled, eyes tired. He looked like a man who had spent the night trying to solve a problem that didn't have the answer he wanted. "Mom," he said. No good morning, no softness, just the word. I poured my tea slowly, letting the silence stretch before I answered. "Yes?" He stepped closer. "We need to talk." "No," I said calmly. "You need to listen." That stopped him. Immediately. Because that wasn't how our conversations used to go. Celine entered a moment later, already composed. Of course she was. She had made her decision overnight. I could see it in the way she held herself. Straight, controlled, prepared. "We're not leaving," she said. No greeting, no hesitation, just a statement. I took a sip of tea, set the cup down, and looked at her. "Yes," I said. "You are." Graham exhaled sharply. "Mom, enough," he snapped. "This has gone too far." "No," I replied. "This is exactly far enough." This is it. The point where they stop pretending and push back directly. But notice her tone. She's not defending anymore. She's holding ground. "What would you do right here?" Celine stepped forward, her voice smoother now, but there was steel underneath. "We've spoken to people," she said. "You can't just remove us like this. We've established residence. The children are enrolled in schools here. This isn't just your decision anymore." Ah, there it was. The external pressure. The attempt to bring in authority without actually having it. I nodded slowly. "I expected that." Graham frowned. "Expected what?" "That you would try to make this complicated." Celine's expression didn't change. "It is complicated," she said. "Legally?" "No," I replied. "It isn't." That landed harder than anything else so far, because now we weren't talking about feelings, we were talking about facts. I reached for the folder on the table, the same one she had noticed the day before, and opened it calmly. Paper doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't argue. It simply exists. "This house," I said, sliding one document forward slightly, "is fully owned by me. No shared title. No secondary claims. No agreements transferring occupancy or rights." Graham stared at the paper. Celine didn't. She was listening, carefully. "You were invited to stay," I continued. "Temporarily. No contract, no lease, no legal standing beyond my permission." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. "You can withdraw permission?" Graham asked, slower now. "Yes." "And just... that's it?" "Yes." Celine crossed her arms. "That's not how it works in practice," she said. "There are processes, protections." "Of course there are," I replied. "And I've already started them." That was new. That changed something. Graham looked at me sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, closing the folder, "that by Friday, this house will no longer accommodate you." Celine's composure slipped, just a fraction. "You've already planned this," she said. "Yes." "How long?" I held her gaze. Long enough. That was the truth. Because this hadn't started on Sunday or yesterday. It started the moment they decided I would accept anything they arranged for me. Graham ran a hand over his face. "This is unbelievable," he muttered. "You're doing this to your own family." I stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. "No," I said. "I'm doing this for myself." That distinction mattered. More than anything. Celine stepped closer now. "And what happens after Friday?" she asked. "You think this just ends? You think this doesn't change anything?" I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I allowed a hint of something through. Not anger, not bitterness, just clarity sharpened into truth. It already has. Silence. No one moved because they understood. Not fully, but enough. The house wasn't slipping away from me. It was returning, and they were the ones standing in the wrong place. I picked up my cup again, took another sip, and said the only thing that still mattered. 3 days. By Thursday, the house had stopped pretending. No more careful tones. No more soft adjustments. No more polite distance. Everything was exposed. Graham didn't go to work that morning. He stayed, pacing, sitting, standing again, phone in hand, then not. Like movement alone might solve something. Celine, on the other hand, became sharper, quieter, more dangerous. She didn't argue anymore. She coordinated. I watched her from the dining table as she made calls. Short ones, efficient, stepping just far enough away to suggest privacy, but not enough to fully hide it. "No, that's not what I said. We may need temporary arrangements. Yes, I understand. But this is sudden." Sudden. That word almost made me smile. By midday, the first visitor arrived. Of course. There's always someone who thinks they can fix things. It was Graham's aunt, Lydia Corvin, his father's sister. 65, sharp-tongued, always convinced she understood every situation better than the people living inside it. She walked in without knocking, another detail that mattered. "Mavis," she said, already halfway into the living room, her coat still on. "What on earth is going on?" I didn't stand. I didn't rush. I simply looked at her. "Good afternoon, Lydia." She frowned slightly, thrown off by the lack of urgency. "I just spoke to Graham," she said. "He tells me you're throwing them out." "I'm asking them to leave," I corrected. "That's the same thing," she snapped. "They have children. And I have a house." That stopped her for a second. Just long enough. She glanced at Celine, who gave her a small, controlled nod. "Go on." "I think you're being emotional," Lydia continued, turning back to me. "You've always been sensitive about control." Control. Interesting choice. I folded my hands calmly. "No," I said. "I've always been clear about ownership." Graham stepped in then. "Aunt Lydia, just..." "No," she cut him off. "Someone has to say it." "Of course. There's always someone eager to step into authority when they think the ground is weak." "You can't just disrupt a family like this," Lydia went on. "Do you have any idea what this does to children? To stability?" I held her gaze. "Do you have any idea what it does to someone to be removed from their own bedroom?" That landed. Not loudly, but directly. Celine shifted slightly. Graham looked away. Lydia blinked. Because now the conversation wasn't abstract anymore. It was specific. "And before you answer," I continued, "you should know something." I reached for the folder again. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just precise. "These are the property documents," I said, placing them on the table. "Fully in my name. No shared claims. No agreements. Lydia didn't touch them, but she looked, and that was enough. This isn't about legality, she said quickly. This is about decency. No, I replied. This is about reality. Celine stepped forward now. This is escalating unnecessarily, she said. We're trying to find a reasonable solution. You had one, I said. She paused. We lived here peacefully for months. No, I corrected. You took control quietly for months. That hit, because it named it. Exactly. Graham ran his hand through his hair again, frustration boiling over. Mom, just tell us what you want, he said. What will fix this? I looked at him, really looked, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw the boy again, but only for a second. Nothing fixes this, I said. Silence, because that wasn't the answer he expected. I'm not negotiating, I added. Celine's expression hardened. So that's it, she said. No compromise? No. And if we don't leave? There it was, finally, the question behind all of it. I met her gaze without hesitation. Then it becomes formal. That changed everything. Not emotional, not personal. Formal, legal, final. Lydia straightened. You wouldn't, she said. I would. No hesitation, no softness, just truth. Graham stepped back slightly, like the ground had shifted under him. Celine didn't move. But I could see it now, clear. For the first time since this began, she had run out of moves, not because she wasn't capable, but because this wasn't her space to control anymore. I stood up slowly. The room went still. You have until tomorrow, I said. Not louder, not sharper, just closer. Because now it was real. Not 3 days, not an idea. Tomorrow. And for the first time, no one argued. Friday didn't arrive quietly. It arrived with movement, not subtle shifts or quiet tension. Real movement, the kind you can hear before you even open your eyes. The low rumble of a vehicle outside, the metallic click of something being unloaded, footsteps that don't belong to the people who've been living under your roof. I was already awake, dressed, ready. When I stepped into the hallway, the front door was open, wide. Cold morning air drifting in, carrying the scent of wet pavement and something sharp, like fresh cardboard and packing tape. The movers had arrived, right on time. 2 men stood just inside the doorway, waiting, not unsure, not hesitant, just professional. One of them nodded when he saw me. Mrs. Belcroft? Yes. We're here for the scheduled removal. Scheduled. Such a clean word. Behind me, I heard it. The shift. Graham's door opening, fast. What is this? His voice cut through the house, rough, unprepared for what he was seeing. I didn't turn immediately. I let him take it in. The open door, the men, the boxes stacked neatly just outside, already labeled. Then I faced him. It's Friday, I said. That was enough. For a second, he just stood there, like his mind was trying to catch up to reality. Then it hit. You actually did this? He asked, disbelief breaking into anger. You called movers? Yes. You're serious? Yes. Celine appeared behind him, already dressed, already composed, but not calm. Not this time. You went behind our backs, she said. I looked at her. No, I replied. I went ahead. That landed hard. Because it stripped away the argument completely. Graham stepped forward, voice rising now. This is insane, Mom. You don't just bring strangers into the house and start. It's my house. The words cut through everything. Clean. Final. The movers shifted slightly, waiting. Not involved, not emotional, just present. Celine crossed her arms. This is harassment, she said. You're forcing us out without due process. No, I said. I'm enforcing a decision I already made. She stepped closer. You think this won't have consequences? I held her gaze. It already has. Silence, then movement. Not from them, from the hallway. Elliot stood there, backpack half-zipped, eyes moving between us and the open door. Mom? He said quietly. Celine turned immediately. It's fine, she said too quickly. Just go get your things. But it wasn't fine, and he knew it. Children always do. The younger one, Lila, appeared behind him, clutching something small in her hands, looking confused more than anything else. The house felt exposed, like all the invisible lines had been drawn in permanent ink. Graham turned back to me. Where are we supposed to go? He demanded. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't have one, because the question itself was misplaced. Finally, somewhere that's yours. That hit deeper than anything else so far, because it wasn't about location. It was about reality. Celine exhaled sharply. You're destroying your own family, she said. No, I replied. I'm removing myself from being used by it. That was the truth, and everyone in that hallway felt it. The movers stepped forward slightly. Ma'am, one of them said carefully, how would you like to proceed? I didn't hesitate. Start with the bedrooms, I said. Clear, simple, and that was it. The moment turned into action. Drawers opening, closets being cleared. The sound of hangers sliding across rods, one after another, like a steady, irreversible rhythm. Graham stood there for a few seconds longer, like he was deciding whether to fight or accept. Then he turned, sharp, angry, and disappeared into the room. Celine didn't move at first. She just looked at me, longer than she ever had before. And this time, there was no strategy in her eyes, no calculation, just loss, not of the house, but of control. She turned without another word and followed him. The children moved quietly, uncertain, pulled into something they didn't create but couldn't escape. And I stood there, in the hallway, between what had been taken and what was finally being returned. No shouting, no chaos. Just the steady, undeniable sound of things being undone. Exactly as they should have been all along. By the time the last box left the house, the silence felt different. Not empty. Restored. It was late afternoon. The kind of soft gray light that settles into corners and makes everything look a little quieter than it really is. The movers had finished an hour ago. The door had closed. The engine noise had faded. And for the first time in months, nothing moved unless I moved it. I stood in the hallway for a while after they left. Not because I needed to, because I could. That's something people don't understand until they lose it. The ability to simply stand in your own space without adjusting for someone else. The air still carried traces of disruption. A faint smell of cardboard. Dust stirred from corners that hadn't been touched properly in weeks. But underneath it, there it was. My house. Graham hadn't said goodbye. Not properly. He had come out once halfway through the process, looked at me like he wanted to say something. Something real this time, not rehearsed, not defensive. But whatever it was, he swallowed it. Turned. Left. Celine didn't try. She walked past me once near the end, her expression composed again, but thinner somehow, less certain. She paused at the door, just briefly, like she might speak. Then didn't. Control doesn't apologize when it loses. It just exits. The children were different. Elliot stopped. Actually stopped. "Grandma?" he said, quieter than I had ever heard him. I looked at him. Yes? He hesitated, then stepped closer. I think they were wrong, he said. Simple, unfiltered. I nodded once. I know. He looked like he wanted to say more, but Celine called his name from the driveway, and that was enough to pull him back into their world. He turned and left, and that was it. No slammed doors, no final argument. Just departure. This is the moment after everything. No noise, no chaos, just silence and consequences. She didn't scream, didn't chase, didn't beg. She let reality do the work. What would you feel standing in that house right now? I walked into the living room slowly. My steps sounded different on the floor. Sharper, clearer. My husband's chair, the bergère, was still slightly off-center where Celine had moved it weeks ago. I stood in front of it for a moment, then reached down and shifted it back. Just a few inches. But exactly where it belonged. That was the first thing I corrected. Then the kitchen. I opened the cabinets, took down the labels, one by one, peeled them off carefully, not ripping them, just removing them like they had never been necessary. The spice rack went back to its original order, not alphabetical, practical, lived in, the way memory organizes things, not systems. I opened the refrigerator. My preserves were still there, pushed to the back. I moved them forward, front and center. A small act, but not insignificant, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. I moved through the house like that, room by room, not rushing, not cleaning everything at once, just reclaiming. The hallway, the living room, the kitchen, and finally, the back room, the small room. I stood in the doorway for a long moment. The bed they had placed there was still against the wall, narrow, temporary, almost apologetic in its presence. I walked in, ran my hand along the surface, then stepped back. No, I said quietly, not to anyone, just to the space itself. I turned, walked out, and went straight to the phone. Another call, short, precise. By evening, the bed was gone, removed, like it had never been meant to stay. I opened the window, let fresh air in. Then I went to the closet and pulled out a box I hadn't opened in years. Fabric, soft linen, a deep, muted blue I had once bought without knowing exactly where I would use it. Now I did. I laid it out across the chair, measured the space with my eyes. Not for necessity, for intention. Because that room was never going to be a place where I was put. It was going to be a place I chose. I stood there as the light faded, the house settling into its old rhythm around me. No footsteps, no voices, no quiet planning happening behind walls that belonged to me. Just silence. Real silence. And for the first time in a very long time. It didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. The house didn't need time to feel like mine again. It already was. That's the truth no one tells you. When something belongs to you, it doesn't become yours again slowly. It returns all at once. The moment the noise leaves. The moment the pressure lifts. The moment you stop adjusting your own life to fit someone else's expectations. By the next morning, the air felt different. Lighter. Not because anything had been added, because something had finally been removed. I woke up at my usual time. No footsteps in the hallway, no doors opening before I was ready to hear them, no quiet conversations I wasn't meant to be part of. Just stillness. Real stillness. I walked into the kitchen and made my tea. Properly, this time. Loose leaves, exact temperature. No interruptions. No one rearranging anything behind me while I worked. I sat by the window, the same place I had sat for years, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a guest in my own morning. The house had settled overnight, not into silence, into rhythm. The kind it had before, the kind built over years, not imposed in weeks. Later that day, I finished the back room, not as a compromise, not as a necessity, as a choice. The walls were cleared, the air was fresh. I brought in a proper chair, not something temporary, not something borrowed, but something intentional. Upholstered in that deep blue fabric I had kept all those years without knowing why. Now I knew. A small table by the window, a reading lamp, a stack of books I hadn't had the patience to return to before. The room they had assigned to me became the room I chose for myself. That's the difference. And once you understand that difference, everything else becomes very simple. Around noon, my phone rang. Graham. I looked at the screen for a few seconds. Then I answered. Hello. Silence, not empty. Heavy. Mom, he said finally. His voice was different. Not confident, not defensive, just uncertain. Yes. Another pause. We found a place, he said. Temporary. Just until we figure things out. I'm glad. That surprised him. I could hear it. I thought you'd... He stopped. Thought I'd what? I don't know, he admitted. Be colder. I almost smiled. I've never been cold, Graham, I said. Just clear. Silence again. Then, quieter. I didn't think it would go this far. I looked around the room. My house. Steady. Quiet. Exactly as it should be. It didn't, I replied. It went exactly where it was always going. He didn't argue. For the first time in this entire situation, he didn't argue. I'm sorry, he said. And that word, it mattered. Not because it fixed anything, but because it was real. I know, I said. Another pause. Then, can we talk sometime? Not come back, not fix it. Talk, better. Yes, I said, sometime. Not today, not tomorrow, but not never. That was enough. We ended the call there. No long conversation, no attempt to rewrite what had happened, just acknowledgement. I set the phone down and walked through the house one more time, not checking, not correcting, just being. Every room in its place, every object where it belonged, every silence earned. I stopped in the hallway, the same hallway where this all started, where I had been told, calmly, casually, that I could sleep in the small room. I stood there for a moment. Then I smiled. Not wide, not dramatic, just certain. No drama, no revenge, just boundaries and consequences. If you were in Mavis Belcroft's place, would you do the same or stay silent like before? Write in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.